I'd like to call the Capital Improvement Committee meeting to order August 19th, 2020 at 3:30 PM, the Resource Room. I believe it's going to be on YouTube at some point. But the first order of business is reorganization, so I'm going to turn it over to the administrator.
Oh, that's right, I have to wear that hat when we reorganize. The question before the committee is to reorganize, and the first is to elect a chair. Are there nominations for chair?
I nominate Mike Fitzpatrick.
Are there any other nominations? There are no further nominations. All in favor of Mike Fitzpatrick being chair, signify so by saying aye.
He'll take it.
Yeah. Oh, after you vote him in, then I'll ask him, are you sure you want to do this?
You sure you want me?
I didn't say I wanted to. I'm not member of the committee.
Well, you asked me a question, put me on the spot, I figured I'd put you on.
Sorry, hey.
All right, there you have it.
Why don't you move over to here and I'll slide over there.
Right into the hot seat. All right, I gotta get a copy of the agenda.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
No, copy of it. So we did the reorganization.
No, you need a vice chair?
Huh?
Do you? Yeah, you do, just in case you can't make it. That's what you do.
Oh, to make a vice chair?
No, you get nominations for a vice chair.
Would you like to do it, Shelley?
No.
No? Would you like to do it, Shelley? No? Would you
Someone's
like
gotta
to do it
nominate
then?
someone.
I mean, you know, we've got other people, younger
Right,
people.
no, I know that.
I'll do it.
Yeah.
And your name?
Ben Tessino, T-U-S-I-N-O.
You're a member?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Shirley
Hi.
Mazinski.
Just figured I'd go around the table, so no offense, Ben.
That's okay.
Stop from here, go to there. Luckily, you stopped me before I get there.
So did anybody nominate him?
I'll nominate Ben.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, I guess.
You're a rising star, Ben.
There you go.
Come to a meeting.
Pretty much what all happened.
So, Mr. Administrator, I have this list that Jean handed out. I have this article that was emailed from Kent last week, and then this list that you had sent, just a summary of the projects. What are we going by?
So
Yes.
I will go by my own work product because I know what it says, but I based mine on the article that
Okay.
the chief sent. So,
Because this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out of the 7 of them, 1 is on hold, and 4 are in process, and 2 haven't been done as of yet. Looking at this list that Jean sent us, there's multiple things on here.
yeah, so I think at the beginning of my memo, I said I was only updating you on the fiscal 20 items.
Yep.
So that's what the current membership of the committee would have participated in the last time through in that article.
Did we do
And I deferred to
anything?
Jean, I said Jean was going to update this, the full scheme of things, which goes back, there's a sidewalk project down here that goes back to 20.
We're in 21 right now, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we're planning for fiscal 21. The idea would be to try to get to the November STM with additional clarity around the state budget to inform town meeting's decisions on what projects to go board with or not. I think, well, last year, the top priority, if I recall, was public safety radio. Was that the number one score? I think that was the highest score in the,
Yeah, and that's why we had the 173 that went towards it.
so, as I explained in my memo, that item was estimated based on, we had a couple meetings on this with all of the radio users and went through their inventory. And the idea would be, we would replace everyone's inventory and try to get everybody on the same band. So that they could, from one radio, communicate with one another in the field. They may have to switch channels, but at least it would be one, VHF radio, one repeater, ideally. Not one repeater, but repeating on one band rather than having to use cross-band repeaters. And so that was the cost of replacing portables, mobiles, and the repeaters. And separately, in the operating budget, we obtained VHF frequency for the fire department, which was completed. I forget what that was. That wasn't a lot of money. That was more elbow grease on Mr. Bodzina's part, not so much money. So the frequency's been assigned, so now police and fire have VHF. Your highway department is on what's called low band, which is a very old technology. It is extremely reliable, so it's kind of like elephants communicating in the desert. It's occurring on such low wavelengths that it has a strong signal pretty much everywhere. The trouble is, it's not commonly used, and the manufacturers are no longer
It's
updating or
obsolete.
servicing their equipment. It's obsolete. And so many of our highway staff are call firefighters that there was this other issue of having a truck full of radios so they could listen to everybody, which is less than ideal. So and then we have, I'm going to remember three handsets and one car repeater for water and sewer were part of the conversation as well. Anyway, that estimate was to replace all that equipment with new. In the background of this conversation was a conversation about the reliability and clarity of the communications when they're in the field. Where are the dead spots? Can we actually hear each other under different weather conditions when the leaves on the trees are not, and all the rest of it. And there was a study done under a grant, I believe, that Chief Foley obtained for the 10-0. That was a mathematical modeling exercise for radio coverage. It wasn't an actual field test. And it really just didn't work out.
Yeah, because there's been conversation about, I remember with the police department having a lot of issues.
Dead spots. And those dead spots happen to be problem areas for us, because I really don't worry too much if public safety is responding to an incident on Main Street and there's people all around. We have antennas in this building and there's other vehicles can get here fairly quickly. It's more when they're in the forest and they're looking for somebody, then they lose touch with each other. You can't find somebody if you don't know where everybody else is. And as we pursued that conversation, we didn't spend a dime, so we couldn't run right out and done a procurement, but we didn't. We asked the question, well, how much of this will be fixed or not fixed? And I went out to emergency radio 5G conference that Verizon put on, and listened to all their whiz-bang presentations, and we were talking about, I'm looking to the chief for like little verifications, but he's looking down. But I think we were talking about push-to-talk for a while as well as a potential option over an AT&T tower network called FirstNet.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to...
So it operates something like the old Nextels did or something?
Yeah, it's basically more like a phone. So the company it's called Kodiak, they bought the technology that used the power push-to-talk through, what did you just say?
With Nextel.
So, that was a conversation being driven by Motorola and their reps in the field, trying to get people to adopt push-to-talk and get to that next generation of radios on FirstNet and with their technology. And then when we shopped that idea, and I think it was Chief Miglianico who did some additional research, or Mark, or you, or all of you together, more likely,
Right.
was, well, if we buy this technology right now, it's going to be super expensive. There's not enough money in this capital allocation to fund this. Which led us to have another conversation with another radio expert called Marcus Communications that has done a number of network rebuilds for public safety using technology that's called simulcasting. So they're beaming microwaves from one tower to the next. The towers need to be able to see each other, but microwaves come a long way. So it used to be in the old times, a good heavy rainstorm would interfere with your microwave signal. I guess now they concentrate it. GPS has made it possible for them to be more accurate in shooting waves to each other. Long story short, it was a way to repeat or hunt or vote, I guess is probably the best.
Yeah,
Voting
voting systems, right.
Using voting system to get to the closest tower and then using microwave to jump the tower. That would solve all of our coverage problems in town. Trouble is, microwave technology is way cheaper than it used to be, but it's still more expensive than we had in this account. So we put the whole thing on hold. Marcus Communications is a statewide contract, so we don't need to procure through 30B. We could just do this. But we held off because there's not enough money in the account. We didn't want to do a partial solution. That solution, this is where I'm going to get fuzzy. You have the report. Did you make copy?
Right here, yeah.
And that's this.
Yeah.
There's a tower in Webster, just over the line, just barely over the line, that is industrial communications. And they would be renting, it would be in our operational budget, they would be renting to us, was it $800 a month?
Right.
Something to that effect, yeah.
To cover that part of town, then it would go to the water tower behind Ellie's house. And then what was the solution going to be for East Douglas? It wasn't the high school. The high school didn't work out.
Wasn't it something it was something over that way.
May have been Uxbridge's tower,
It might have been.
northeast Maine.
I only recall the high school not being an option because of the line of sight issue with the
Line
high
of sight
school, I
issue.
believe. But I'm not sure if there was a secondary
Maybe we
location.
dropped that one.
Yeah, I can't recall.
So they have to be in pretty close proximity in order to work.
Yeah.
Line of
Because
sight.
that was going to be my question,
You'll be able to
is
see each other.
if Uxbridge had them and Webster had them, we don't benefit from being in the middle.
Right.
Well, we all have to get there first. So for the longest time now, we haven't been on the same band as our mutual aid partners now. But for police, I don't think that's true anymore.
Well, we're on both VHF and UHF. Surrounding towns, depending on which one you're in, could be VHF or could be UHF. That's why we're looking at dual band technology.
But fire, you legitimately had difficulty talking to mutual aid. You couldn't talk to your own police department, and then unless you had their radio. So, long story short, this was a piece of, for all intents and purposes, free consulting. And then you see the price estimates begin on page 2. It does say 3-site VHF simulcast system. And then instead of being pushed to Motorola, we'd be using Kenwood, which is our existing. Our existing product. So that's where we stood with that, so we held off on that. And then when the COVID came, we didn't have this committee meet because the idea was if the state budget were to crash this year, what were going to be our backup sources of funding, free cash being the first level of insulation, but then the second level would be unallocated capital. That's where we ended up with radios. I think that the generator was number 2.
Yeah, before we jump onto that,
Yep.
can I ask you a question about this? In your summary here, you have the cost approaches 500,000 for the entire project.
Yeah.
But on page 2 of this report, 439 just for the simulcast systems, 3 of them, and then the 155. So it's all these combined plus these other ones, the lower the second part of the cost is multiplied by how many radios you need and so on and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, but there was, now I'm searching for it, it's in the string, but it's probably not printed for you. There was a way we could take that, maybe that's what we did, is we took that one microwave position out and it saved money. I remember us ending up with we're not gonna be in the 700s, because that wouldn't even think about it, it's just not, that point isn't feasible.
Do you need that thing that's in the firehouse single position console and the police
I
two
don't know
position
if
console?
it's that either. We'll have to reprice this is,
I'm just curious because the numbers don't add up
yeah.
even close to 500,000. You're far exceed. How many mobile radios would we need?
I need another minimum of 15. We got 10 a couple of years ago, actually, a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
but I only was enough for officers and full-timers, so.
So that's like 20,000 just for those alone. So when you start adding up the numbers, I was just looking through this and comparing it to that. I'm like, I don't see where we got 500.
Yeah, but then there was discussion about the police department maybe being able to keep, it's all fuzzy to me, 'cause this is
Yeah.
a long time ago. But I think we were gonna pare this down by using some of the equipment we already had, dropping one of the tower sites, and going with probably one of the least expensive options there.
For the portables.
Yeah.
Instead of doing dual band, I don't know if those were dual bands or not, but
And just out of curiosity, for the equipment that you would be keeping,
yeah.
what's the longevity of that? Would it be obsolete in 2 years down the
Back at it,
road?
well, it wouldn't be obsolete, it would just,
Well, yeah, outdated or whatever, where, because, like Christine has a problem with the voting machines. You just can't get parts for them, they're falling apart, all this other stuff. Or the highway department radios where you said nobody makes the stuff anymore. So if we're keeping this, are we
I think,
down the road, how far down the road would we be trying to upgrade that? Does it make sense to push it out that far is all I'm asking.
yeah, your need was portables, right? Your
Correct.
mobiles are newer.
Right.
So-
Well, they're all over 10 years old. The
But they're
quotes-
compatible with this system.
Wow.
No, but like you buy a computer, you got Windows 7, then you get Windows 10, then they come out with something else, you gotta throw all your programs away because none of them, that's the only reason I'm asking this question, is to make sure that we don't put out a big expense and then find out that
Yeah,
we're gonna be
Right,
whacked
compatibility
with
with,
some big upcharge to try to, because you're already deep into the project. Now you can't abandon it because you spent too much money and you're held hostage. So
I
I'd
think
like
what
to
we
look at it
don't-
as a whole.
so first of all, this is more of an update to the committee on where we stood with it, and the answer is we didn't spend any money. So if I had to come back and do a number, we would be much more spot on.
okay, so,
But I also want, the note I want to make is that we don't want to be in a position where everything needs to be replaced all at once. So if there's a way we can, 'cause some of the fire department's equipment is pretty new.
Yeah.
So if there's a way for us to keep that going, then
I'm all for
get into a 5-year
using
pattern
whatever
where
we
you
can,
half and half.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Hopefully you didn't misunderstand what I was asking, is I just want to make sure that we don't paint ourselves into a corner, that's all. We definitely need to do something. If you have, I think you, if I understood it, you have 3 different systems that you're trying to make work, and you can't logically communicate with the bordering towns without having 2 radios. You got 2 different systems going, if that's.
Mr. Wojcik, I just sent you the the board. Remember, we did that out on the board?
So for purpose of discussion on this radio, what are you looking for?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. I
Okay.
just wanted to do the
All right.
update because the other piece of this was the generator for this building. And it was the same, again, just by way of update. Why didn't we do the project? The estimate was based on replacing like to like. So replacing the generator we have now, which is not in good shape. So they come out, they service it, the warning bells are there in terms of what's rotting, what's old. And we will have to, no matter what we do, we're gonna have to fix a couple of things. When a generator turns on, a lot of you probably have a generator at home, there's supposed to be a thing called the transfer switch that prevents you from surging your lines that just went dead because they're off the street, power from the street. We don't have that here. So when our generator kicks on, universally, every single time the generator turns on, we fry an appliance. We fry something. Either it's a backup power unit or an old dead server or something downstairs in the police department. It's just not a smart situation. So that needs to be fixed. It was in the course of preparing the procurement. So I was writing what's called a written purchase description, which is the spec, what it was that we were looking to buy. We asked one of the vendors to provide us with an estimate and some, the rough outline of a spec, because we were going to try to leverage a grant to get additional funds to do more than just a generator replacement for town hall, but to do other things in the server room and meld it all together and make it all work. So as part of that project of filing a grant application, which was a best practices grant under the community compact, we got a gentleman, electrical engineer, came in and said, well, you don't really want to do it the way you set it up in your capital budget, because and he went through the long litany of things that were wrong. So not just the transfer switch, but everything that we were hooking up to. And we have 4 or 5 panels downstairs that are all scattered, and they were added onto and taken away from over time, and then there was loading from the police department. It's changing. So we started having a conversation about, well, what we really want is we want the building never to go down. So it's not just the police department and their assets. So right now, it's pretty much the police department, their assets, and the heat for the building that will turn on when the generator turns on. But if this is the emergency operations center, then this floor has to be operational as well. With lights, and our servers, and everything else to be fully functional. We started sizing it, conversations about fuel, and what's the best way to locate the thing. Is it the existing pad? If you have a bigger generator, our existing pad will work. And the net result of all of that was a fairly detailed estimate. There was a menu, if you will, that we picked from. So we picked as many items from the menu that we could have fit under the grant threshold. And we weren't successful with the grant. So the net result is we didn't do the project because we don't have enough money to buy the generator we need to do it right. We rated this, you guys rated this pretty high the last time you did ratings. And the truth is, the last week when the windstorm came through and a lot of people lost power, we lost power here. We lost cable first. So our Spectrum connection to the internet, we lost that blinked. And then my experience in my office, I don't know if it was the same in the rest of the building, is that the power came on and off, on and off, on and off, about 3 or 4 times within about 5 or 6 seconds. And just and the generator fired up. We lost the UPS in here. And then the police server that was powering the police server, so that police server went down. And that's a cascade of events that we just can't have happen. There's one time we need emergency services to be able to get to the internet and communicate with everybody and get to their stuff is when we're in an emergency. So I know Mark was up here with Bull in a China shop, pulling stuff
Right.
apart, replugging things, and got you back up, right? So
Yes, yeah. Probably we're down 2 hours.
2 hours. So that, our generator shouldn't be destroying stuff. It doesn't do us any good. If it turns on, it blows everything up. So we're still there, and that, nothing has changed. Those were the two projects that we didn't, we chose not to do at all. Now, going on from there, I don't have all the heat cards.
You want the summary?
Yeah.
To use?
Exactly. The clerk bought the new machines for the election. They've already been used once. And there is a remaining balance. She closed that out. Yeah, so she closed that out, so the 1,700 is available.
So which sheet are you going
On
by right
page
now?
2 on my,
Well, it's
Yeah.
a email that he had sent with the summary of,
Yeah.
it was a memo.
yeah,
Oh,
But it's somehow we can follow it on this one that Jean just sent out, I think.
you could if you wanted to, because if you look at the dates.
Well, I don't have another one, so.
So the voting machine.
So the one I have, article, well, I have both, but article, are you talking like the items on, it says Article 10
No,
adoption?
there's a
Okay.
summary that Matt generated. So what he's talking about now, Shirley, if you look on this handout from Gene,
Okay,
far
yeah.
right-hand corner, the very
Yeah.
first one that
No, I
says
got it.
project is closed.
I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same sheet.
Well, we aren't.
And just a reminder, if you're looking at mine, if the project is closed, that means I have I have a memo from the department saying the project is completed and those funds are available. On the general ledger, they will not be closed out because I don't want them to go into free cash. So I encumber them into the next fiscal year so that they're available for transfer to fund another project. So the department is saying, "You completed the project, I'm done with it," and then I leave it on the books
Yeah.
until we use it as a funding source for the next one. Unless, like the Sullivan property, that's gonna close out, it's less than $100, I don't keep anything open. So that we've already addressed, so you're gonna see that disappear.
Okay.
But the 1,700 for the voting machines, the 8,700 for the ear duct cleaning, Bill gave me a verbal on the 47,697 for the police windows, the portable radios, the ambulance, the DHS water booster, the primary school security. I'm questioning whether or not the brush chipper should close out because John was looking for a harness on that, and that's why I reserved that 5,000. That's why I don't say its project is closed,
Right.
because it didn't exist yet, but I don't know if it exists now. So I would hate to see us use that money and then, hey, we found it, and so I'm iffy on that one. And the historical commission, 4,900, that funding is no longer needed. The municipal center resource sound room for 1,911, that's actually going back to the cable receipts reserved for appropriation accounts, so that's not available here. But this is what I consider the pay-as-you-go capital. It's funded in the general fund, and like I said, the money will stay there until it's transferred to another purpose.
all right, so you're getting ahead of me a little bit though.
Sorry, I just
trying to do the
was
update. So for
She's
Ellie's
just trying to
purposes-
straighten me out, that's all.
For Ellie's purposes, this is 8 or 9 items down. Town
Yeah.
clerk voting machines, it
Yeah, I
was
got
voted in
that.
19. She asked for 23, she spent 21,700, so her 1,700 is remaining. Next item is the highway plow.
That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the bottom.
Highway dump truck with sander
Yeah.
at 198,240.
Yeah.
This truck is being bought off a state master pricing list from Minuteman, and it was originally supposed to have a wing plow, and the truck isn't configured for the wing plow. So, the original salesman from Minuteman gave us bad information. In the final analysis, if you wanted a truck that's big enough to push the wing plows, the whole thing would have been a bust. So we went with the standard plow instead. So this is going to probably save for us a number of the components that go into finishing. So we order the chassis, and then the body gets, and then the doodads, so to speak, get installed by someone else. By Tejada, I think, is doing this one. The parts all come from Canada. When the border has been closed, so everybody's delayed. We'll still get the truck in time for sanding this year, but my understanding is it's still at the dealer. The chassis is done, it's been there for a long time. It's waiting for, mostly it's stainless steel sander body, is what it's waiting for.
Was any of this a benefit from that Volkswagen?
No, the state decided to give the Volkswagen money to the richest communities in the state.
So everybody knows what that is because of the emission problem
Yeah.
of Volkswagen, we might have qualified. for
We
it.
put what everybody who saw it called the strongest application out there for
Yeah.
this. Because we had a 1996 that was blowing pure smoke,
Yeah.
like a coal-powered battleship from World War I.
Yeah, an environmental
It
guy.
blew up the
registered.
thing, and we did a test, and we made our best case. Here, what we were told by the graders on this, we didn't score as high on one category, and it hurt us a lot. We don't run that truck except to plow snow. So its
No.
miles and its hours are low for a truck of its age. Therefore, the actual savings to the atmosphere of nitrous oxide and other things was not high enough. So what they're telling us was we should be running this thing year-round, we get a new one.
To pollute the air.
Right, just keep polluting the air with your old one, so we're taking it out of service anyway. So when the new one comes, the 96 will go away. And we'll take another crack at it, but if that's the way they're gonna allocate this money, then we never get it, because we just don't have, the highway department isn't that busy with these big trucks.
Right.
They're plows, they're not really working trucks. They don't, I think we only have, John's not here to correct me, I think we only have one truck that has a stone body, I don't think we have any others. So digging in Douglas,
Right.
you need a stone body, so. That's where that went. So that was the discussion, right? So we asked town meeting for enough funding for one truck. We put it on the grant application as a match to be 50% of two trucks.
Correct.
We didn't get the grant, so we went and bought the one truck. Police tablets and related expenses, this is nearly complete. So we were replacing tough books, which Brandon can explain it better than I can, but they're designed to take a real beating. But the problem is that it's like anything else. The sacrifice you make is in terms of memory and, you know, the asset runs out of usefulness as a computer long before it gets beaten up to the point. So we never broke any, but they all got outdated.
Correct.
And they're super expensive.
They are.
They're outrageously expensive. So
Very.
Dave in IT basically told us, look, you know, the new Surface Pro product from Microsoft, you could break 5 of them and you still wouldn't spend as much as you would spend on one tough book. And their capabilities are far exceed that of a tough book.
But
So
it's
they've
not
been-
as durable.
It's not as durable, but we still bought heavy-duty rugged barriers when we haven't broken anything.
No, they've been running
They've been
very
in
well.
service for how long?
I would say since January? I
January,
wanna
so
say.
almost 7 months.
Yeah. Yeah, screen protectors, all that.
But they have Sky cards, they're connected to LTE, right?
Verizon, correct.
Verizon.
Yep.
So, and you just got yours. So, the guys in the field really seem to like them, and there's gonna be a balance.
Actually, they're gonna probably spend that.
You think they're gonna
I asked
spend
to
all of
close
it?
it out, they're ordering one more.
All right. The hotspots can be, they were just installed on everybody's. Are you done?
My cruiser hasn't been done yet, but the engines have been.
Much more reliable than the air cards that we were using previous.
Yeah.
Much more reliable.
Just waiting on
Yeah.
a bracket.
Next item is the ambulance. This is A2. Same specification as the ambulance we bought the year before, with one major difference. It's not a diesel, it's gasoline powered. The state legislature had given us a grant for $100,000, so all we needed to do was cover the balance of the cost of the ambulance. And we wanted to bring the CPR machines and make them the same. So that was all spent out, and there's a balance there. Now, are you gonna go back after this, or are you gonna close this out? Close out this
Yeah,
ambulance?
that's, the 3,600 is closed now.
The adult social center flooring replacement for $24,000. Again, was the cost of replacing the floor. Pulled up the floor, did a sample, and there's tiles under the floor that have asbestos. And then the $24,000 covered the cost of the remediation, but not the floor. We rolled this into a grant application, an attempt to use ADA access funding to do the whole cadoodle. So the ramp down to the adult social center, the ramp inside the building that takes you down, and then the flooring, and then a couple of doorways into the lavatories. Make the whole thing compliant with ADA. This is a very important project, so even though it's only 24 grand, we've had people fall on the rugs that are pulling up off the floor. So this has to be addressed. We score very high on the ADA grant. Again, we have a lot of things, so we have an ADA compliance plan. We have Mark Kaplan designated as our ADA officer. We are missing one thing to push our score over the threshold, so we're reapplying this year. We have to appoint an ADA committee that will be involved in various town activities to advise on ADA issues related to different projects, especially municipal access. That formality, if we populate it, we're going to use it. We're going to ask people to come to meetings and participate. Other towns, they appointed everybody. They didn't have to produce minutes or anything, but they got the points in the grant competition. We did. So that's on hold. It didn't get spent because we don't want to tear up the floor, remediate the floor, and then be stuck with no floor. As it turns out, we've been closed this almost the whole year, so
It worked out.
it would have worked out. Municipal Center Resource Room sound upgrade, that was completed. So the microphones you have in front of you feed speakers out there. There are speakers, the mic's hanging out there, feed a speaker that's over your head. And they did something to prevent gain from one to the other. But it works really well. I think the sound quality and our meeting transmissions went way up. It's kind of hard to tell now with doing these Zoom meetings in Avaya, but when we were back on our traditional system, it made a big improvement. We also did do ADA compliance, so we have the equipment, so if somebody needs assistance here in the meeting, if they come to me, we can provide them to the meeting. The notice to proceed has been issued by the planning board for the Shady Knolls highway bounds. How long we want to belabor that one. We've had a lot of projects built in town that haven't properly memorialized where the highway bounds are for future reference. This becomes an issue when somebody tries to sell a lot and they can't find their boundaries. It's kind of a pain in the neck. And if we're going to insist that people do site plans in the future, then we have to provide them with a permanent marker so they can start serving from some point. The MS4 compliance design, this I need Bill for. MS4 is stormwater management. And I think this is a three-phase project. One was situation assessment, the second is planning, and the third is implementation. I think we're in the planning phase now. And we've come a long way with stormwater management. First of all, the town did buy a catch basin cleaner, and it has been used religiously every year. And during my time here, we have not only been getting rid of those tailings that we scoop out of the ground properly, but we've been going back to prior years when the stuff was put in the pit, and we've been scooping out some of that every year and sending it off to proper disposal as well. We should be caught up pretty soon, but this is the consulting piece. This is writing the plan for stormwater management going into the future.
Mr. Chair, I may?
Yep.
Just going back 1 minute, so from the resource room, there's $1,911.70. Is that being kept, Jean?
No, that one will revert back to the cable receipts reserved for appropriation account, because the majority of that money came from that funding source.
Okay,
So it doesn't
okay.
get to be used for anything else, and it doesn't go into free cash.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Sorry.
This is in draft form because I'm actually closing out the year now, so I'm starting to meet with the departments.
Sure.
So I knew we had a meeting today, so I put it in, it's still in draft form right now.
Sure.
Until I do the final closeout with departments, and then you'll see some of the other columns filled in.
Okay, thank you.
So the last item in the update from last year is the LED lighting project
Yep.
to upgrade the lighting fixtures at the primary school. This was a Green Communities project. I think this 18155 was there to make them liquid.
And this was used in, to cover the cost of the rebate from National Grid. So the town appropriated the money, and then we would expend it, and then National Grid would do the rebate.
Yep.
National Grid actually paid the vendor, which they shouldn't have.
Right.
So I'm waiting to reconcile this grant. And again, I expect that this 18,000 will be available. I'll get a memo from Bill to close the project, and then you'll see there's an available amount to be transferred.
Okay.
But that's, the ongoing effort is to upgrade all of our appliances so that we use less and less electricity. We've really come a long way, and this was something that Mike Kaczynski started. He did quite a lot of work, and now the Green Community stuff has come in to backfill it. So really, like I say, we've come a really long way. This part of the municipal center is still inefficiently managed in terms of air handling. And the chief's building is a disaster, basically, when it comes to energy efficiency. If you sit in the fire station during a windstorm with the wind blowing from the west, it's the whistling west wind.
The AC's great, though.
You haven't got blown away?
You don't have AC.
That's my point.
And the furnace is a tiger. I mean, it's just ripping through the oil. So it was a building designed for a different purpose at a different time. Now that it's being utilized much more with a full-time fire department, ambulance department, it's showing the strains. It wasn't set up to do this. So in terms of energy efficiency, when you add up all the things that we've done, whether it was during Mike's time when he signed us up with the solar deal with Con Ed, and you'd get 20% off your bill because you get the solar credits, and the energy efficiency, and then we've shopped out our energy buy, so we're buying on a forward contract, and we're beating the market by a couple of pennies a kilowatt hour. So you add all that up, I don't know how much less our energy usage could be, except for the problems I just mentioned. So it's been pretty good. It's really, if we had continued on the path we were on, we'd be spending a lot more every year.
Just one more thing on that, if I may.
Yes.
So I think it was mentioned before that the fire department also had problems with people having to stay there and air conditioning and so forth. Is that still a problem?
Yep, no, we haven't
Only building that doesn't have air conditioning outside a highway.
My house doesn't either.
Yeah,
Gets
but I mean, no, but these firefighters in the building, and, I think there was a problem with, their lodging as far as heat in the building, and really, the building isn't probably that insulated. So I
No.
remember hearing of
You're
that.
missing probably 20 to 25% of the insulation that should have been installed wasn't. So there's a corner of the building that's straight to the air, kind of the way the library was before a lot of the work was done. So, first things first, we wanted
Yeah.
guys to be able to turn the key and get the ambulance run.
Yep,
Yep.
oh, I
And have
understand.
equipment that can talk to each other and people can train on,
Yep,
that services the ambulance. And now I think, you will get requests and you'll have to prioritize them
Yep.
per your normal process. So all I was going to leave it with, Mr. Chairman, at this point is to kick it back to you. Since Jean got ahead of herself and gave you skinny already, there are two tasks which kind of lie ahead. The Board of Selectmen asked the Capital Committee to review all outstanding projects that hadn't closed yet and prioritize them in terms of what would be first. So if the town had to use this as backfill for the operating budget, which projects would you part with first? That's one way of skinning the cat. The other would be working with Jean and then getting a couple of more detailed estimates. Could we use unexpended funds from projects that are no longer as high a priority as they would have been in the past? Go to town meeting and ask for, town meeting? Well, you would need town.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Reprogram those funds to the projects that you've already voted as high priority, to
Which
fund
have
them
been put
without
into
using
a
free
separate account
cash.
and they're just sitting there.
Right. So let me give you an example. There's $50,000, I think, sitting here for a fire alarm extension to the second floor of this building. I don't see the point of pursuing this because the roof leaks. So moving upstairs would only get us closer to the leaks. But, right, so wouldn't you fix the leaky roof first? Or do the other public safety projects first, so that you can queue up the real issue in this building, which is replacing the roof and getting rid of those monsters, air handlers, that aren't even running. They're just up there taking up
Yeah,
space.
we've been talking about those for a
letting
couple of years now
air
with
go
building
through.
of facilities.
So that's the second way to skin the cat, would be to say, well, notwithstanding the board's request that money be set aside as some sort of reservoir, why don't you use it to fund the capital budget and then not use any free cash or less free cash and just leave that for the town to use for a rainy day fund?
Do we have a list of stuff like that, which isn't on either of these lists?
good question.
Well, what you have to do is parse through this list.
Well, it's not on the Jean's list here. This is just for fiscal year '20.
No, this is all the capital projects
all.
that have
Yeah,
a.
if you look in the third column, Ellie, it has the dates next to when, at the town meeting, the
okay.
2007 is the first one.
Well, it just says FY '20 general fund capital projects, so I figured it was just for
Right.
FY '20.
Yeah, but I got confused with it at first, but then I started looking through and seeing all these different dates.
Okay, so where is the smoke alarm part in
I said
here?
50, it's 101.
Is
It's
that here? Oh,
101,
okay.
it's about a third of the way down.
Yeah.
Started off as 35,000.
Right.
So, Mr. Administrator, if I understand what you just said, is we should just take a fresh look at where we stand right now, because we have all these old projects just sitting there on hold for a lack of funding or for whatever other reasons, and reprioritize what we really need today, then Gene would tell us how much money we have sitting in all these different accounts, and then that would be presented to town meeting, correct?
Well, it chooses a funding source
Yes.
to fund whatever priority.
Right.
The only thing is, you know, when you do things like that, and I don't know about your feelings, but I know with me, the taxpayer already voted for these. They've already gone to town meeting, they've already said that they felt this was necessary, and I just want this committee to make it very clear that the need doesn't go away. I mean, there was a need for this. It's just, we didn't have the funds available, and you had something else come. Because I don't want them saying in 3 years, well, we've already paid for that. We've already had the money, and people have short memories, and they don't go to every town meeting. And so I just want it very clear. It's not that the need is not there. It's
Oh,
just,
yep.
you're
Yeah.
saying that I want to do something else first.
I fully agree with you on that. There needs to be explanation as to why you wouldn't, like, to Matt's point about the fire alarms for the second floor of the town hall. When we were talking about that, because I'm on the building facilities as well, so I'm familiar with that particular portion of it. There was discussion about expanding up to the second floor, so
And we
then.
need that space. I mean,
I know we need
still
that
don't have
space,
it,
but
yeah.
there's a few roadblocks in there
Yeah.
to get that, and they're pretty expensive roadblocks. And Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what he's saying is that in the foreseeable future, we don't see that materializing. So it may make sense to properly explain it, obviously, but may make sense to take that money that's been appropriated and try to use it to correct some of these major issues that we have, whether it's the communication issue, the backup generator that's for this building.
And I'm not disagreeing with you, but I just want the message to be clear. It's not that the space is not needed. I mean, I was scheduled to have my, you know, facing a men's room. I don't have any privacy, I talk in code.
I wave to you every time I come out.
Yeah.
She really likes it when we have firefighter training here, there's like 50 guys.
No, I fully understand.
We are condensed, there is no privacy. There is a need to go upstairs.
Absolutely, and hopefully you don't misunderstand me and think that I'm diminishing the need for any of these items that are on here.
But as part of your message, again, I don't want a taxpayer to come back and say, I voted for that.
I agree.
I voted for that back then, and you didn't do it, and now you're using the money for something else, and you're gonna ask me for it. I just want the message to be very clear, because I know, you know, in my community, in Uxbridge, I say the same thing. Well, you know what, I voted for that. You know, what'd you do with the money, or why didn't you do the project? So I just want.
No, absolutely, and I think with that, what my point is there needs to be a valid explanation as to why it's not being done. Not that it's not needed,
And that's the more important point, is, you know,
but at the end of the day, you have a certain amount of funds to use.
and I understand that as well.
And you just have to figure out where they're going to be best used to meet the needs of the town.
But yeah, as I'm assigned to my office, you have to explain the story behind the numbers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's important to explain that story.
Correct.
Because
Yeah.
if they're looking at that one, you're looking at, what was that? You know, that was back in 15 and 17.
Mhm.
You know, so
Right.
Yeah,
things
we
came
have-
up, but you have to explain what, that's all I'm asking. You
No,
just have to
Sure.
explain-
absolutely. 2 days ago, I called Matt up first thing in the morning because I had this list, my notes are still on it. I had his list there. I said, can you bring me up to speed what this is? Because I need to understand it.
I think the
I
other
don't
thing
want to
that
just come in
happens-
here blind, and I expect everybody else to feel the same way. They want to know what we're talking about.
And make it part of the town report, you know, so there's record that people need to go back to. I don't know about you, but my memory, especially in the last 4 months, I've lost all track of time.
No,
But the other
we
thing
hear
that
you.
happens is time passes,
Yeah.
and so the condition of the assets change.
Yeah.
And so,
Well, it's like
you know,
to her point,
the
she said
leak is
back in
started
15.
when I started working here, but before that, you didn't have that leak, so it wasn't in front of mine.
Mhm.
You could say the same thing about how old were John's trucks? Well, 8 years ago, they were 8 years younger, so you weren't thinking about replacing
Right.
that sander that's in last year's capital budget. You had other things. I think the one thing that I will say philosophically, I'll point out the difference. It's up to the committee, it's not, I'm not the boss of it anymore.
Yep.
But philosophically, I would rather recommend to the committee that you prioritize items and fund what you can from the top of the list, rather than have a budget and fund what you can. So if you had $35,000 left after your priority projects, go back through your list and find, well, it's lower ranked, but we can afford to do it, so let's do it. I'd rather not do that. I'd
Right.
rather carry the 35, not spend it, not ask the taxpayer for it, and come back the following year and get back to the top of the list again.
Yep.
And do the priority items, not items that were good enough to get on a list and that we owe. So that's the way you do grants, right, at the state level.
Yeah.
Oh, we had $1 million, we gave Uxbridge 500,000 and Webster 300,000, now there's 200,000 left. Rather than doing one, let's split it up in 4 communities that were ranked lower, just so that we can spread out the money more.
Right.
That's a political decision that's not driven by the data.
Yeah. Yeah, and I fully agree. Just judging, going by the list that Gene gave us, it's very clear to everybody that just because the money's there doesn't mean you need to spend it. That could sit there, some of them in 2007. It's in that account. What's more important is what do we need to do and can we afford to do it? Not, all right, so we have an extra $5, so we jump down the bottom of the list and do the other piece. No, we just leave that $5 alone because that may have a very low priority, if that's what you just
You
explained.
kind of skipped some
Yeah.
things because they were too expensive. So, and I realize it's not a savings, it's not a piggy bank where you're saving, but in a way you are, because you're setting a tone that we're not going to ask the taxpayer for anything unless it's really at the top of the list. Now, these things, like, I think, I agree with Gene, a lot of these things were probably at the top of the list. At one point, GASB 34 and 35 were, that's all we talked about.
Right,
Yeah.
but and that money is to do a town-wide fixed asset
Computer.
thing, which we just
Yeah.
haven't done.
Right.
Does the need change? No. So I would argue that that one and the
But that you're required to do by the state.
financial software, there's one piece of the conversion that we didn't do yet, and that's for the water sewer department. So that, there's a reason why that's residual. And there's a reason why I haven't had that project close out, because once that project piece is done at the water sewer department, we have to pay Munis for that. So that's why that is there,
You're talking, excuse me, Jean.
the financial software.
Yeah, okay.
1275. Now, there's some that, the Gilboa Street and the subdivision parcel taking, those I'm unclear of, and I'm going to ask Cheryl for some explanation on that, because we did appropriate that at a town meeting under a special article, but we never used it, and I don't remember the story behind those two. That's either
Is that the
Cheryl or
parking
Bill's
lot?
question.
Because I don't remember that being on a town meeting warrant, but I'm sure it was.
Anything on here is a special article on the town.
But it was the parking lot on Gilboa Street across from,
No, this
The
had
mill?
No, that was a
something-
tax taking.
Yeah,
This
these-
was, I believe, the corner of Gilboa and North. There's a empty space there, and I think
Oh, where
there's
everybody pulls in.
like an old, there's an old raceway just below it, or an old
Yeah.
wall to a building. It's a microscopic lot. It's not buildable or usable to anyone, but I think we were trying to settle out with the Schuster heirs, actually. It's an old account, and the 4,300 was put there in case they wanted it. But I think there's been a conversation since then that,
So some of these are just unclear, so they may be available, so there's some, again, we're in draft mode, and these will not close out, but they would be, once we determine from the department they're available to transfer, we'll get that memo, and we'll put them as funding is not needed. The same with the historical commission, the funding, we received the notification that the funding is no longer needed.
and the sidewalk, is that part of the builders? That's, they're paying for that, or that
That
was?
was on 16. Shirley, you probably remember that.
Isn't that just above, or right around Franklin Street?
Yeah.
to the new project.
But did that money, was that money from the developer, or
No.
is it?
I don't think
Was
so.
it generated by the town?
It was, any of these were a special article from the town.
Because that was, I believe, considered a dangerous area.
Yeah.
And it was from the new well, it's not new anymore, but from that development there onto Main Street.
Yeah, I remember voting against it, yeah.
Yeah, so we,
I didn't remember that.
Sticks right out in my mind.
Dangerous area, but, I'm sorry, Ellie.
A sidewalk
Good one,
either.
Ellie.
all right, but I have a mistake for you, which is that it is kind of a dangerous area.
It is.
The reason why this has taken so long, because believe me, I've been on Bill about this, is visually, I don't know if you notice it, but from his perspective, you know, when you actually get down the weeds and you're walking it inch by inch, the roadway veers around within the right-of-way and creates all of these little pieces of right-of-way, right? And
Yeah.
then it leaves you with, if you want to stay clear of the right-of-way and move the sidewalk over far enough away from it, you had to follow.
Yeah.
So what we've done is surveyed the property owners in the area who want the sidewalk, because they're walking their kids and then they get to the end of the sidewalk, that they have signed written affidavits that they're willing to give the land to allow for the sidewalk to be located in such a way that it's not interfering with the telephone poles. And our one remaining issue is, again, you don't notice it unless you're pushing a plow or doing something, but there is a monster catch basin at the bottom of that street that is not a modern, it's not a modern installation. So if you're pushing a baby carriage down there, you know, it's really big,
Yeah.
and, you know, it's not safe. And so that's not part of this 58,000. That was the cost of making it a sidewalk.
Right.
And now all the other improvements that would have to go in place to make it a safe environment. So Bill is working now to try to, I think we are at like 30% design on this.
Okay.
Or further along. Because with that accommodation by the landowners, there's more room to move things around it. We still have to address the catch basin issue.
I thought sidewalks were a school type of thing. If your kid was walking to school, that's why the highway still plows them in the winter and stuff like that, is that, and that's why there's one up by the VFW building, because that used to be a fourth grade school there, and there is a sidewalk there. But that's the only reason why, is because there was a school there. You know, and even the kids that walked down to it, I knew on my street, the kids were young at that point, and they were going to that school, and they would walk down to that school. But I still, I would vote against it again if I had the opportunity. That I didn't think that I thought that the only purpose of sidewalks was for schools, for the walking kids to school. And the sidewalk ends sort of at, Franklin Street or below it even. And it doesn't go all the way up there. Main Street has, and this street has sidewalks. So I question why there was, I understand your concern and your worries and stuff like that, but you have to live with this stuff. We live in the country, and, not every property needs a sidewalk in front of it.
No, and I don't believe that. I mean, if you ask me my philosophy, while we're talking about it, is that you take care of the ones you have,
Yeah,
first and foremost.
well, you're stuck with them. Yeah.
Because, because it's a risk to the town. If you don't, you at least have to have a sidewalk maintenance plan. You don't have to fix everything right away, but you have to have a plan, and to get to that point. So, again, I wasn't here in 2008, I got here 9 years later. My advice would have been, well, if it's falling apart in front of the Chinese restaurant and the little gas station there, then we should fix that. Right? Before we think about expanding to new. And the same philosophy with water systems. don't put new pipe at the end of old pipe that you haven't maintained for 40 years. But that's, we could go all day on philosophy. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, the next thing on your agenda is to hear from Gene, because I'm curious, how much of this do you think is available to the committee?
So anything with the project closed is available for funding. Again, I received a verbal from Bill on the 47 right before the meeting. I expect the LED as well to be closed at $4,133.92. And I want to talk to John again before that 5,000 is deemed available. Now, the second sheet that I just looked to is what we have in the capital project account. So these are more long-term, bigger projects that had some sort of money borrowed component to it. The municipal first floor window project is complete. That's the $67,000. The gym windows is not. They haven't even started that yet. That's just the engineering. The posture roof replacement at the elementary school is complete. The remaining water booster, painting of Church Street, those and the water main, those are all water sewer department projects. And the library renovation, that was back, the residual of balance from years and years and years ago, for $3,615. I think the municipal first floor window had some free cash component. I'm going to look at that again. So if that has free cash within it and it exceeds the $67,000, I would make the argument that that would be available for the types of capital projects that you're looking to fund now. If it's any borrowing component, you have to look at a project that can be borrowed for the same length of time. So you can't, you wouldn't be able to use it for something that lasts, that's a building, so a shorter period of time. So I have to see what component of that is from free cash.
So you said the library renovation, the partial roof replacement of the elementary school, and the municipal center first floor windows, these figures, 67,000 and 21,000 and 3,600, those would be available for capital? That's what's remaining in those accounts?
That's what's remaining in the accounts, but I have to look at where the money came from
Where
to fund
the
those
funding
accounts.
source was, if it came out free cash or not.
So if it came out of free cash, it can be used for anything, any legal purpose.
Yeah.
If it came from another project, like a school project, and it was residual from the school project, well, that has to be restricted to the length of time that you can borrow for that school project. So I have to look at the funding source from the original articles.
Yep.
If it has to be used for that length of time, you have to wait for a project to become available for the same, that you can borrow for the same length of time. Like you look building to building.
The life expectancy of the asset or the life of the note?
The amount of time that you can borrow for a loan. Yeah. So usually you go building to building.
So I'll ask a dummy question. So he needs windows desperately, just as an example. So if you want to move some of this from the first floor windows here to address a window project, we're not going to borrow for a window project at the fire station.
You're not. But if it was originally borrowed money, you have to look at the restrictions from the original borrowed money. This was a combined article, so this was.
No, don't get tied to this article. I'm
Okay.
just theoretically, so if it's all excluded debt, right?
Well, if it's
That's the
excluded.
category we're talking about.
If it's excluded debt, then it has to go to excluded project. So that's different.
So if it's not excluded, but it's
Yeah.
in this, on this list,
Yeah,
it could go to another project with an asset of the same lifespan. So windows to windows would not be a bad match.
no, but if it came from free cash, so and I'm pretty sure we did multiple fundings in that 67,000. And I think I'm almost positive that part of that came from free cash. You can use it for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no restriction from it. But, I mean, it has to be transferred to town meeting has to vote it, but you could use it to buy computers. There's no restriction to that, because free cash can be used for any purpose, and there's no length of time associated with it.
Could
You always need town meeting vote.
the 3,600 for the library renovation design, could that be used for the article that's on the annual town meeting warrant for the library?
Oh, yeah, masonry repairs?
Yeah.
For what?
Masonry repairs.
Okay.
I would not use that for that,
Why not?
because one is just maintenance and repairs. This was more,
Yeah.
this was.
An item,
Huh?
a capital item.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're just doing.
Well,
Building.
because it doesn't cost over $10,000, it can't be a capital item. So that's why it's not
But you're
a capital
doing
item.
maintenance.
You know, we're stuck that way, so why not use this money that's hanging around?
Because I would have to use, the article that you're referring to is electrical masonry on the building as well as the stairs.
Right.
So it's maintenance, it's not a capital purchase.
Because
I would
it's
have to
under
look at the
$10,000.
I don't think it's because it's under 10,000. I
Yeah,
think it's because.
that's what you say in the bylaw. It has to
Right,
be
but
over
you put
10,000.
things together. Each item is just I would consider that an extraordinary maintenance that the library just doesn't have in their operating budget.
Okay, well, I just thought this is a nice way to get around
Yeah,
all of
I'd
that,
have
a
to
free
look at-
way of getting, not free, but
I'd have to look at
Using
the
them.
funding source for this 3,600. So I'll have to go back to the article to see where the
Given the
funding.
funding source, but I think we also, there's electrical repairs and then there's electrical repairs. In this instance, the receptacles in the floor are, they're not up to code.
well, we got called out on by
Yeah.
the building inspector, so,
So that's a
Yeah, it's
different.
not up to
It's not
code.
like I broke it, I need to go fix it.
Yeah, but again, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, no, I-
Because when Matt first went through his explanation, he cautioned us on picking through the list versus prioritizing first, and then going
Gotcha.
about it that way.
okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm not-
you just want to use these funds on the lesser sheet, the shorter sheet, for capital items, not for extraordinary maintenance problems.
I would use it for capital items first. And I believe with the library repairs, it's being used, funding source is free cash, which is appropriate.
Well, yeah, I don't see why this couldn't be used.
Well, I'm not saying you can't, I'm just saying I would have to look at
Yeah.
where the money came from to fund
Yeah.
that original
Okay.
project. Because the project cost more than 3,600, that was just the residual piece, and that was a number of years ago. So I'll look at where the history of the money.
I just need some clarity for myself. First day on the job. It's not our job to decide what money is spending where, it's to prioritize the list, correct?
Yeah, but I think the list that you make is constrained by your funding source, so that's why it becomes a relevant consideration. So you might have a list of things that are eligible
Yeah.
for one kind of funding, but not for another.
Yeah, I just didn't want to get
Now,
distracted
that's
by
why you
figuring
can't
out where
pick.
we're going to spend
You can cherry pick.
$5,000 versus what we're talking about, because we have
Yeah.
two major expenses that are on our list, one being the generator and one being the radio system. And then we have all these other things that are also thrown in here. So we got to figure out how we're going to prioritize the list, I would, from what I
So I think
understand.
you'll need to get your requests from your department heads
Mhm.
and consider those against things that are already funded,
Right, yeah.
and then establish your list. Because the list changes from, the things that people request change from year to year too.
And when do you want this list by?
Well, if you want to put this on STM, when would we need it? Middle of October?
Well, no, FinCom sets meeting in the middle of October. So we usually look right around, what is it, the Tuesday after Veterans? When's the election this year? So
We've had the election. Oh, you mean the state and federal?
Yes, there is.
I think that's
You know that
November
whole
3rd.
election thing?
Yeah.
Election counts.
Yes.
It's around November 3rd, I think.
The first, well, primary is the September 1st, the
No, I know,
November,
but we wouldn't
November,
have town meeting that week.
is it November 12th?
I had to think about that, like.
I thought it was November 3rd or something.
We always run into trouble because you can't, you don't want to be on the same week as the election and you don't want to be
Right.
on Veterans Day.
Right.
Yeah.
So the election's probably the 3rd.
Yeah.
The Veterans Day is a Wednesday, the 11th. So we would either look at the 9th or the 16th for the special town meeting.
Yeah, election day is the 3rd, yep.
Yeah.
16th would be good for a lot of reasons.
16th would be what?
Good for a lot of reasons. I mean, that's an extra week.
Yeah,
You can squeeze another meeting in.
and we usually have everything into FinCom by that first or second week, the latest of October. So you would have to have, you're backing up for that, you have to go to the board before FinCom. So you're looking at probably the latest third week of September, right?
Would be.
That's when the boards meet. So it's about a month per turnaround.
But
Hopefully the departments have their homework
departments
done.
have already submitted a fair amount of things. So the first question would be, do you want to revisit what you've submitted? The second, we have all the material from last year, so it only would need to be updated. And anything that they were going to add to what they'd already requested in the past, unless they were going to drop things. Because remember last year, we did a 5-year capital plan.
True, but I remember reminding you, things change.
Yep.
And requests would probably change depending on what's happened.
Right.
Not knowing it's been a disaster of what's happened, but, so, yeah, we need to revisit it every year because things do change. Unfortunately.
So I guess we need to reach out to each department and get their current list.
We can circle back and get what's already been submitted. Adam submitted, I believe. Did you,
For this year,
for this year?
when we were going to be having meetings?
Yeah,
Okay.
before we got short-circuited by
Yeah.
COVID in March.
So, do you have those, or who has those?
Matt has them.
Yeah,
I have Adam's, and since yours are yours, if I don't have them, you do.
okay, so you haven't asked for them, the committees to, or the
They were
department?
supposed to be submitted by a date.
Wasn't
The memo
it
had
December
just
to
gone
January?
out.
There was a date, and it was all supposed to have already been submitted by all the department
But
heads.
that was for this fiscal year
No.
we're in now, or we're about to be
The
in.
assumption would have been a May town meeting.
Right,
Correct.
And that the capital committee would have done its work in January, February, and March.
right, and this would be for the next
So now
year
we're-
21
It'd be
to
for
22.
FY '21.
for-
Yeah,
So that's the one that we're meeting at the annual town meeting in September.
Yeah.
So we haven't done anything for FY '22.
There
November.
is nothing on the town meeting for FY '21 yet. We're looking
Right.
at the FY '21 piece for November. Everything was delayed by like 6 months.
Yeah.
yeah,
So you may look at it in November, and you may look at it again in May for the following year. It's very confusing. It's like a time warp.
yeah, gotcha. So, Jean, your report, anything else from your from
No,
the...
you've got 4
I have
minutes.
answered everything right now.
I value your information.
Yeah, that was
It's a
good.
lot of information, I realize.
I'll do homework on the 3600 LE. I'll
Thanks.
send you an email.
Well, yeah,
I have to look at the 67 too, so I'll see if I can find the funding sources on those.
and that shouldn't be that hard, because that probably was money, well, way back when.
It's been a number of years.
Yeah.
because- Well, at one point, I may not have touched it because we were proposing a library, and I like to use like items with like items.
Right.
And I may have not have touched it for the school department for that reason, because we did clean out a bunch of the capital pieces when we built the schools. We closed out a lot of those accounts, the little accounts.
Yeah.
But I may not have intentionally done that because the library was coming forward. And I would have liked to, again, taxpayer voted, they were supporting the library project, I would have liked to use it for that purpose, so I'll look at it.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any particular days or times that people can't meet?
If you expect me to be here Thursdays, that's a payroll day, it's every other week, I just generally do all Thursdays.
For me, it's 3 PM to 11 PM. I can't be here.
On any day?
Well, my shifts rotate, so yeah, it's pretty much any day.
Okay. I'm usually open,
I'm retired, so.
yeah, me
I'm
too,
a
but that's,
troublemaker, so. Too much time on my time.
No.
Hands.
I have too many things to do,
Right.
Obviously, Tuesdays are rough.
Yeah.
sure.
Every other Tuesday is
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah, but you've been meeting every Tuesday.
Yeah, and the only reason I ask is to prevent, can you meet Monday? No, I can't meet Monday. You meet,
Right.
no, I can't.
You're never going to get everyone here all the time. It's not going to happen.
No, I didn't expect that.
No, it's
But
mainly,
it's easy to ask up front if there's anybody has any issues with any particular days or times. It just makes the decision process a little smoother.
I don't like evenings, so.
That's the only time we're meeting. Just come right down the sidewalk.
so did I hear that Caesar,
Just
is he
email.
still want to be on the
Well, he
board?
responded, so
Yeah.
he must still want to be on the board. Having said that, there's a bylaw about this, as I recall.
You have 3 unexcused
It falls to
absences.
me to be the heavy on it.
Yeah, I mean, he was good when he came. He has some good background,
Yeah.
business experience. But, and of course, we haven't been meeting, so, but it'd be good to see if I thought
Right,
somebody said he had retired or,
Ken had said that he sent out an email.
Yeah.
And he didn't make it clear that he was coming today, correct?
I never got the first one for last Wednesday. And then all of a sudden, I started getting them, and then when I was reading back everybody's stuff, it looked like I had gotten them all. So-
and you know
I
what?
don't know
That
why.
same thing happened to me, and I don't get yours
I think it's
until.
just that part of town.
Yeah.
You gotta get me out of your junk folder, is what you're gonna do.
No, you
Yeah.
weren't in my junk folder, because I check.
No, to be fair to Caesar, we should just reach out to him and find out if he's interested in continuing. He may have had something that came up or didn't get the email because he lived near them or something.
No, I don't know where he lives, but, no, seriously, I didn't get it until later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't get that. Wait, and I looked at the date, and it was like, I think a week ago?
Yeah, it was just that day that it was canceled because it wasn't
Yeah.
posted right, so,
Yeah.
or it hadn't been posted.
So my one question, this is sort of theoretical, Mr. Chairman, but if memory serves me, I think there are 3 of you on this committee.
3 of me.
No, 3 of you on this committee
You have nightmares.
who are on building facilities.
Yeah.
You're on
I'm not.
building-
No.
you're not on building
No,
facilities.
There's
no,
two
I
of
wouldn't
us.
want to
She's
be
on
that
library.
one. Yeah, that
But,
would be
and there's a
Dean's
vacancy
favorite.
on this committee that's been vacant for a long time.
Okay, so what do you want me to do? Stop one?
Well, it's a bylaw, so, but I would like to at least float the idea that building facilities is capital. And
That would have to go back to the town meeting because
It's
it's
go back to town meeting to change it.
Same as
April
capital.
10th, 2010.
I think what my understanding of the history of it was that it was created to address shortfalls in the way the town was doing procurement for buildings. Bidding, following all the requirements, and then following up with people on where the project stood once they were completed, once they were launched. So once the capital was approved, to the time the project was completed on a building facilities, and it seemed like a lot of it had to do with this building, and not all of the buildings in town.
For building and facilities?
Yeah.
That's on any project that's, now it's up to 50,000. Any project that was over 10,000 before when it was first made, and then we changed it to 50. So whether it's the Cedar Street Bridge, the North Street Bridge, the roof on the school, the windows in the gymnasium, anything that's going to exceed 50,000 would, even the police radios and all that, would go through there. By combining, if I,
Well, I
your
guess my-
thought
my
process, maybe
question is, to what
combining,
end?
combining the two, there's a, by serving on building and facilities for the last 7 years, I think there's a value to that, where Bill's heavily involved in it. He brings us up to speed as to where this goes. We're meeting with the architects, going through that process, getting updates. I think there's a value to it. I don't know if combining these two committees together would necessarily be a good idea, especially if he can't come 3 to 11 every other day, or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be.
I guess to
Doesn't
play
want
devil's
to-
advocate, to what end? What does the building facilities committee
When I,
have the authority to do? Now, that's an
well, it's in the
important question.
bylaw what it has the authority to do, but I think initially it was begun, and Shirley, you could probably pick up on this better than me, was because you had a school building committee, and these people became adept at, what questions to ask and stuff like that, and why not continue this, this expertise that was created in the community, so all the buildings would avail themselves of that the smarts that were realized. Is that sort of?
Well, it's not only because of school buildings, but
Projects in general.
But-
Cool.
you got all these municipal buildings, and nobody seemed to be paying attention to what's been happening or what hasn't been happening to these buildings, what hasn't been done to keep them up to grade. And then all of a sudden, you've got big projects.
Yeah, but the committee doesn't do that, because when I...
It's an advisory.
Yeah, but when I first joined Building and Facilities Committee, I joined that because I thought I was going to have involvement into oversight of the buildings, to make recommendations, to make sure that they don't look like his old fire station on Cottage Street, which has just gotten worse and worse over the years.
Uh-huh, same what I said.
But what I quickly found out had nothing to do with that. It's to make recommendations to the selectmen as to which projects or not project, but which architect to use. Ultimately, they make up their mind. If they don't like the one we picked, they can pick whichever one they want. But then after the project's going, then we're interacting with that project throughout the whole phase of it.
But it's more than that, because in the beginning, it's looking at buildings that should be looked at by town fathers or whoever, because these buildings have been deteriorating, and then the town ends up with a big project and, many things come, and it shouldn't. We have lots of buildings that we're responsible for, and it's an advisory, and yes, it maybe went further, and we're sitting and listening to these, the architects and so forth, but we need to know what we're recommending to the selectmen, because otherwise, you get it combined with this one, and this the Capitol not only does buildings, but it does the radios, or whatever is needed, an ambulance, it's many things. It's not just buildings. But yeah, buildings are included. But it's to oversee and, and I don't have the exact,
I think the problem is we're not able to articulate what it does, and then that's. my
no,
problem.
there's a
Oh, what?
purpose.
No, it's
If
very
it's
clear, it's very
advisory,
clear in that
I
article
see it
that.
serves no purpose.
So what I'm building up to is,
But we're
your Board
advisory
of
too.
Selectmen has to hold the town administrator accountable for an asset management plan. And as the chief procurement officer for the town, I have to have the training, attend the training, and follow the accountability steps that are required by, whether it's Chapter 7 for design selection, or Public Works, or 30B for procurement of goods and supplies. I don't think that was really being carried out. I think the town set that up. But when you start to really get into a public building procurement, so I think that's Chapter 147.
Yeah,
or
I understand.
142, whatever it is. That's a highly specialized thing. So now we sit through weeks of training on that. So the advisory committee, if you're not familiar with DCAM and some of the other pieces of building projects that we have to put into all of the documentation that then the advice isn't helpful because I have to do it anyway. And I think back in 2000 whatever, or the late 1990s, I don't know that it was being done. So the two things that jump out at me, one is the OPM that was selected for the school project, horrible. It was just horrible.
But that was
Seemed like it
before,
was
that
a-
was before,
It was a
It was
price-conscious
created.
decision of who's going to do the owner's project management, and it was not good. But then the other.
Building and facilities didn't pick that.
No.
No, I think that's why.
We had
it
a
was-
representative.
That's why it was formed,
yeah.
was because that didn't go very well. And then there was really frankly, the total meltdown in this building with the boiler project that
Don't tell me.
seemed like it was lost in a maze with the Minotaur, right?
No.
First, we're going to do 2 boilers, then we're going to do 1, and then we screwed up the louvers on the air intake, and then.
Well,
it was
that
just
was a
show.
contractor, and as far as the 2 boilers go, when we were going through that conversation with that, and George from GRLA came in, and he presented 2 boilers, I asked a question. I said, why do we need 2 boilers? For a backup. I said, okay, when is the last time the second boiler worked? Well, Ricky was a kid. I said, well, then apparently we don't
Titanic was
need
still
Yeah.
2 boilers
Exactly.
because we can get the temporary heating source, whether it's the town expense or the insurance company's expense in an emergency. So there's no reason to buy 2 boilers. So that's where and that's one of the benefits of that committee. There's a lot for this committee to do, to throw that on to them as well. Right now, we don't have a lot of stuff going on, so it's not a big deal. But in the past, we've had quite a bit on our plate with building and facilities. And it gets pretty busy. If everybody's up for it, I guess then it's open for
Yeah,
discussion.
But there's a lot
Bill-
of times where your meetings get canceled because you don't have quorums, too. I mean, we've run into that, the library's run into that.
Well,
quite
you might have
often.
run into it with that, but
Not really.
in the last 7 years, I think I missed 1 meeting because I was in the hospital
Yeah.
out of
There's been a
two different
few,
boards that I'm on.
but not a lot. And if Bill has a good agenda and
Right.
stuff is going
Yeah.
on, yeah, then we're there. But I would like to take a second look at that myself. Check why it was established. There's a purpose.
Yeah.
And mainly, I think it was because nothing was being done. But that's not new. We've come that way, and as far as the boiler goes, yeah, 50-something years old, and I was screaming for it way before that.
But it could have killed somebody.
Yes.
If you were
That's
to,
why I go back to the point where so I have an asset management plan that I've been drafting. I'm on page like 60 of this thing. But on an annual basis, in my role, I fill out we review with all the department heads and what Gene, all of our declarations, so all of our.
I understand.
buildings and the vehicles.
I understand.
So it's all, I've got all the information right there, and it should be, if I read the Town Administrator Act properly, on my plate to make sure I inform the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, Capital Improvement Committee, on what's going on and what needs to be done. So that everybody knows and that
So
there are
no
no
surprises and you're scratching your head trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and the
Yeah,
capital plan
and
has
if you
to
have
be.
the, yeah, if you have the expertise, what I
I
find.
don't know that I do, but I think the
Yeah,
point would be,
well-
I would look to people
Yeah.
who work in construction trades and other things as an informal source of support.
No, but what happens with what the library's experienced is another level of stuff that you have to go through. And not that you people don't do a good job, it's just, all right, now we have to go through building and facilities. you know.
Yeah.
And if you're just advisory, I just don't.
I think it would be important for you to go down to Chris's office or look it up online and find that article from April 10, 2010, and read it, and you'll fully understand what
Well,
we're supposed to do.
I mean, I've read it through.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah, it is, but,
And it has nothing to do with evaluating buildings. It's an advisory position to make recommendations for the different projects to the Board of Selectmen.
but it's a level of rigmarole that you have to go through.
But I think it's
I
important.
mean, I'd rather deal with.
That's what everybody says about
opposed to-
Jean's office. You
Yeah,
gotta
but
go through her.
Well, she's pretty
Not
straightforward.
to drag the meeting on, but I mean,
Just
Okay, so
there might
do,
be another way to get the same result, but maybe writing the bylaw differently. So
again,
it's that, projects of a certain size require a committee
Right.
to support it. So, for instance, if we were going to do a significant, I'm trying to think of a building we would have to do a big rehab on.
Library.
Well, library is a good example. I would want to work with, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't make those decisions myself, or I wouldn't even try to advise the trustees. I would want to put together a committee of people who have worked in either a library project before, or a building of that size, or somebody, if your plans included an elevator, I would want to have somebody, at least one or two people, who've installed an elevator or who've been on a project where an elevator is part of the project. So that we have the benefit of the experience of somebody who's done that before. But it's not a standing committee, because the next project you might have might be a park, Soldiers Field. And so then now you're looking at, well, who's worked, is that a landscaping thing, that might be lighting, it might be all those other issues that go with having a quality athletic field complex that have nothing to do with a library with an elevator and ADA access. So you mandate that there needs to be a committee, but not necessarily a single standing committee where you have to be jack of all trades.
And that's why I'm thinking, in my memory, that it was these people that had served on a committee like that, had gained the expertise, and so that they thought, oh, well, let's just have one committee that does this, instead of each project having to have a separate committee. But
But
I never.
radio's a great example. We would put together a committee that would have people who have experience with radio, public safety radio, and being up on towers and shooting signals, and that advice would be really, first of all, I'm gonna have to get it anyway. I'm gonna have to pull those people into the process anyway. So it's food for thought. I don't think I have a solution. I wanted to ask the question, though, of how all of these things fit together so that people are comfortable with it, because in a way, I feel like I'm neglecting that committee, because I don't go to the meetings. Bill does.
And could Bill
Bill's-
take
It's in the
on
bylaw that you come periodically.
Yeah, but Bill's
Yeah.
authority comes from me on the procurement
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
So I'm looking at what his work product,
I mean, can you
which may or may not be refined by you guys.
rewrite his job description to include stuff like that?
so
Yeah, because he does do one.
Yeah.
I think, that's something to think about, but that's not our decision whether that committee is abandoned or,
That's
What?
the meeting.
No, and I think Matt's just bringing it up
yeah, and I
just for
understand that.
conversation.
But I think we've got plenty to do here, and maybe we need to set up
Yeah.
a series of meetings.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to respond to what Matt was saying, is the only thought that I had going through that was if you do individual committees for each various projects, whether it's the park, whether it's this building, whether it's the radios or something like that, there's the preliminary information that you have to bring people up to speed, and how much of your time or Bill's time or somebody else's time is going to get dominated with just that basic information you need to even get to the decision point or recommendation point, where building a facility where it's established, it already knows how to work around what they need to do and make their recommendation. That would be my only comment on that.
My other quick question is, when's the last time everybody feels like they did a site visit to some of these places?
Site visit to what? To a
To our
job?
buildings or,
When I was a
Look at our
selectman many years ago, and we did, we went to every building. That's when I went.
so I think it might be informative. There's so much work has been downstairs. If you haven't been in the police department, if you haven't been arrested lately, a bunch of hooligans, you.
Not this week.
But, I mean, we need to know the status of just feeling, you've been in the buildings quite a bit, you've been on the roofs more than anybody.
Right.
But
Yeah, I have the luxury of going around to different things because I volunteer my time to it. If you have a question, I'm more than happy to come down and give you my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. Because it helps the town as a whole. And I'd rather do that than have us end up with a major problem. The only thing that is on that description, I keep going back to that article that was done back in 2010. It doesn't define it that way. I would be more than happy to go around and look at these buildings to get a better understanding, because it's a lot easier to make a decision instead of Bill coming in with a bunch of pictures and a whole bunch of papers telling, and now we have to make a decision without seeing it. It's
I mean, the
difficult.
capital committee itself, so,
Oh, the capital
you know,
committee, okay.
if you can meet a meeting at his station,
Yep,
you would see the equipment as well as the building.
yep.
And we could kill that off in 45 minutes, but it's one thing to sit here in this room and talk about
Yep.
engine 1, engine 2, engine 3. It's another thing entirely to have it right in front of you. If there's wear and tear that's visible, you can talk about it. You know, there's just, it's really the building where this really becomes, because we had water coming up to before.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. Immediately, we need to come up with a list for November. We're not going to have time to go around,
Yeah,
visit
that's
these
more
different.
long-term.
Yeah.
But after we get past this November deadline, or third week of September deadline, then absolutely. I've asked multiple times, why don't we prepare more for next year instead of waiting until next year to try to do what we're doing right now? We have 30 days, hurry up. And you can't realistically put together a proper assessment and recommendation in that short period of time.
Yeah, we're all hitting the reset button, that's what we just went
So
through.
it's all behind us, I get it, but I like your idea, fully support that, to go down and visit with the chief and.
Go upstairs here.
Go upstairs here and go around through and see what it is that, I don't know what everybody's experience is, but if there's a technical question as far as construction, I can answer that at the moment, and in most cases, if somebody's asking a question, just to help everybody get their head around it, whether it's in the library, whether it's in the fire station, upstairs here, wherever it is.
And don't forget, we still have the COVID to deal with. So if there's an increase, things shut down. So, but I agree with you, we need to
Yeah.
plan longer,
Right.
because it's always the last minute. I'm all for it, but we need to get on with what's
Yeah.
going to come up with the town
Yeah,
meeting.
November's the first hurdle, but I think after November, we can start.
Correct, and I think we take a more proactive approach to it. It's going to help you a lot more. It's going to give us all a better understanding as to
Yep.
what we're trying to deal with. So I guess there, our plan of action is to get an updated list from all the departments of what they have as soon as possible. And then, if anybody on sitting here understands the priority of this list, I'd be happy to hear it, because I'm going to struggle going through this to figure out who's important on this list.
Well, maybe we kick it back to the same department heads who send in the assignment. Review this list of things that Gene has and
Yep.
close it out if it hasn't been closed out, and it should be,
Yep.
or give us a status update on where it is.
That would make more sense, because instead of us trying to make a decision for the police department, no, we changed it, we're not doing that anymore, or yes, we still need that. And come up with a good definition as to why we want to change something before.
And again, that's to the benefit of the taxpayer.
No, I understand that.
And I
No, and I
understand-
fully agree with you.
I understand the story changes.
Yep.
You know, and we would have done this had,
Right.
you know, but we found this, this, and this, but you
Yeah.
have to tell the story.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You know, and
Yep.
say the need's still there, we will be back. I mean, you're transferring it now, but, you know, when we get our,
Right.
when these things done, we will be back to ask for it. I just, again, memories are short, people change. I just don't want, again, from my own experience, I don't want to say, hey, I voted for that, why isn't it done? You know, what happened? And it's that story that's important,
Right,
you know.
It's like when we're talking about the fire alarm for the upstairs of this building. Would Adam go 28 or 35,000 the first time, and then the number just kept climbing and climbing and climbing.
Oh,
now-
that was a change of use. It was fine for the 100 kids that
Yeah.
were there, but the minute we wanted to move 8 people
Right.
upstairs.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's how the building codes work. is
And you
do what
forget,
you
even,
use, so.
even before your time, Ricky got one price
Yeah.
way back for not as much work, thinking it could be
Yeah.
adapted,
Yeah.
but it didn't work that way, and requirements change.
Right.
Safety and, you know?
And we
Plus,
just didn't
yeah.
have the money to put in capital. at that
Absolutely.
one. You know, we struggled for many years, and
Yep.
that's part of the story as well. But, you know, to Matt's point, I agree, you know, now the funds are there. You just have to explain the story as to why you're using them and not the original purpose, with the understanding that purpose may come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Should
getting,
be a pursuit.
getting back to, explaining, because, yeah, people are already saying, well, what do you mean, we're out of money? And the override, it was supposed to last for 5 years. And here we are looking that it's not.
It's almost 5 years, isn't it?
So what? Since the override?
Yeah.
2.5.
Yeah.
We're
So,
not saying that. We already went through
that's
2
an
years.
For the
issue.
last 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We're in the black this year.
I hear you, but I'm telling you what's out there. And Jean's right, needs an explanation, why we're not doing
Yeah,
this.
Fully agree.
So.
So Matt, you're on the radios and the
Is that a
generator?
challenge to make it last 5 years?
You bet.
I'll take you up on it. I'm there already.
But we also have to provide what's needed, so,
So on the radio and the generator, you're gonna look at that and get us a more accurate number?
Generator I probably already have, because I think his
That's
numbers are
pretty good at
reliable. I just need to
305,
put it
yeah.
in, and I'll go back to him and make sure that he's specking out the project that he thinks should be done,
Yeah.
and not what was available from the grant.
Right.
But the radio thing, I think we'll need to go back at Marcus and refine that. That was, it wasn't that long ago, but it's decades ago in terms
Right.
of the travel
No.
and conversations we've had in this
Yeah.
room.
No, it's just we have
Yeah.
conflicting information, one's
Yeah.
500.
That's
the other
right.
one's-
So I wanted to ask you a
Just get an
question.
accurate number, or
Yeah.
as close as
The quote
possible.
will
Go
be
ahead.
dramatically
It came up,
lower.
And we might as well make it
We'll
around
ban
2
radios, we
hours
don't need
for the
Yeah.
meeting, and I gotta go home, but, so question for Jean, before the override, when was the last time you used free cash? When was the last time you rolled free cash over from one year to the next without using it for operations?
I have no recollection. Before the override? I don't know. We used free cash for operations for many years.
yes.
Which stodgy types like me would call a structural deficit, which you do not have.
So the last thing on here is any topics that we haven't thought about in the last 48 hours, and I think we covered all. So, well, just going down the list, it's the last bullet point.
Gotcha.
Here, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, second.
So are we going to set another time for meetings, projecting ahead?
I think that over the next few days, Matt and I will have to get together and find out where we stand. I need some of that information back. I don't want to set a meeting and we don't even.
I gotcha.
We haven't communicated out to the departments yet.
So moved.
Matt needs a,
Yep, all
what
right,
do you-
Beating a dead
moving.
horse here. Let's get it done.
I agree.
well, I was just trying to answer a question.
Move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. At what time? Whoa,
5:30.
almost.
An hour past my fourth at home.
Should I?